All right, so I begin this lecture as I do all of my lectures with a recap because it's important to contextualize everything because it is a linear stream of information, generally speaking. Um, each subject kind of builds on itself. So we're going to be talking a lot about consumer surplus and producer surplus and total surplus, demand and supply, just like we had in the previous lectures. And obviously these are all models, so build them off of that. It's important to do the recap. And it's important that if you had issues with the midterm, that you're comfortable now, you've checked the solutions, and that you can kind of understand the broader elements at the very least. All right, so just to recall, consumer surplus is the total difference between all consumers' willingness to pay and the price they have to pay. Okay. So for every consumer and every good that was bought, the consumer has a certain willingness to pay, and they pay a certain price. And if you add up every one of those willingness to pays versus minus price paid, for each good that was bought, you have the total consumer surplus in the market. So it's basically like the additional utility I get, or the utility I save versus what I was willing to spend. Okay, and it's like your savings, basically. Like you were willing to buy a burrito for $10, you only had to pay $8, you got $2 of savings there. That's your consumer surplus. Okay. Producer surplus is the flip side for producers. It's the total difference between all the producers' costs and the price they receive. Okay, so producer might receive $10 for selling that burrito, but they produced it at a cost of $4. That $6 of profit per unit is their producer surplus. Okay, so it's the difference between their cost and what they're receiving in terms of price. And if you add up everything that they sell, that's the total producer surplus. Just like if you add up all the goods that the consumers bought and their willingness to pay minus the price paid, that's the consumer surplus. Okay. So in practice, if you had a demand curve, let me do this on whiteboard now that I've discovered it. Where'd it go? I guess I have to reopen it. Here it is. All right, so in practice, if I had a graph, and what goes on the x-axis, y'all should be saying quantity at home. I trust that you are. What goes on the y-axis? Y'all should be saying price. What's downward sloping? Y'all should say demand. And this should be, readily obvious to you. This little piece shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have gone that far. And if I say what's upward sloping, what's left is supply. And then if I ask you where the equilibrium is, you're going to connect the 2 points. And what's this? This is the equilibrium quantity, which I usually define as Q star. And what's this? Is the equilibrium price P star. Okay. So going from here to here, these are all the quantities that were bought and sold. Okay. So every quantity that was bought is going to have a certain willingness to pay associated with it. So if I took the willingness to pay for this guy, that's very, very clever. If I took the willingness to pay for this particular unit sold minus the price paid, I'd have some individual's consumer surplus. If I took this one, it'd be another individual's consumer surplus, and this one. And then eventually, if I took them all and I had it big enough, it's going to be this triangle in here between the equilibrium price and the demand curve. And that is my consumer surplus. Okay. And I'm not going to do the same drawing. It should be seen at an L. But producer surplus will be between the supply curve and the equilibrium price. Okay. So going off that bullet point, in practice, consumer surplus is the area between the demand curve and the price, whereas producer surplus is the area between the supply curve and the price, okay, for the reasons I just listed. All right. The next bullet point, and y'all would have seen this in quantitative assignment 2, is that an allocation is Pareto efficient if you cannot change the allocation to make somebody better off without making somebody worse off. Okay. So if you have 2 people and one person needs to give up something in order to make the other person better off, then an allocation is Pareto efficient. If you can make somebody else better without, if you have 2 people, let's say person A and person B, and you can make person A better without hurting person B, then that initial allocation that you're considering is not Pareto efficient. Okay? So you would have seen this in quantitative assignment 2. I decided not to put it in the midterm, but I might put it in the final. It's still information that you're very much responsible for. It's just I had 150 questions in midterm, or 150 points in midterm 2, and I thought, or midterm 1, and I thought it was going a little long. But you'll probably see it in the final. Yeah. Okay, and then we talked about the market equilibrium, market economy, and we said it was Pareto efficient for certain reasons. Goods are allocated to the highest willingness to pay people. And I did like a big old graph at the end of that, the last lecture, where I kind of showed everything. But for real quick, the highest willingness to pay people are going to be these people who buy, right? These are going to be higher willingness to pay than these people here. Okay, what else? Goods are sold by the lowest cost firms. Who are the lowest cost firms? If you ranked firms from lowest cost to highest cost, you'd have the supply curve. So these people are lower cost. Okay, this person is the lowest cost. This person is the next lowest cost. This person is the next lowest cost, etc. So the lowest cost firms are at the bottom of the supply curve. The highest ones to pay people are at the top of the demand curve. What else? Every consumer who makes a purchase values the good more than every seller who makes a sale. Okay. So these are the consumers who make a purchase. These are the consumers who make, that was a bad call. These are the consumers who make a purchase. These are the consumers who make a sale. And now it's gotten really gross, but you can see that these, I'm messing this graph up. Let me start over. Let's get this bad boy out. All right, so quantity, price, supply, demand. Okay. So these are the lowest cost firms, highest willingness to pay people. Okay. Everybody here on out, purchase. Purchase, sell, or these are the people who purchase. Up here, these are the producers who sell. Everybody who purchases has a higher willingness to pay than the cost of the seller. Okay. I don't want that. Get away. Go away. Okay. Doesn't purchase will be these guys over here. And doesn't sell will be these guys over here. Okay. So everyone who purchases values the good more than everybody who sells it. They have a higher willingness to pay than the cost of the seller. Everybody who purchases has a higher willingness to pay than everybody who doesn't purchase. Everybody who sells has a lower cost than everybody who doesn't sell. every consumer who does not buy the good, values the good less than every seller who does not make a sale. So this is the willingness to pay for the people who don't buy. This is the willingness to sell, or the cost for everybody who doesn't sell. So the costs are higher for everybody who doesn't sell than the willingness to pay for everybody who doesn't purchase. Okay, so if the cost is higher than the willingness to pay, you're not going to want to sell it. So that's why the market is Pareto efficient. It's productively efficient in the sense of the sellers who sell are the lowest cost sellers. It's allocatively efficient in the sense of everybody who purchases values the good more than the sellers, and everybody who doesn't purchase values the good less than the people who don't sell, and that only those who purchase have the highest willingness to pay, or only those who have the highest willingness to pay purchase. So it's productively efficient, it's allocatively efficient in the sense of the purchasers value the good more than the sellers, and not purchasers value the good less than the not sellers. I think I said them all. Productively efficient in the sense that the sellers who sell value the good or have a lower cost than the not sellers. And then it's Pareto efficient in the sense of if I were to sell to someone who isn't already purchasing, if I wanted to sell the good to a not purchase, even if I had a lower cost than them, by doing so, I'd be taking away from a purchaser who has a higher willingness to pay. So the overall utility, the total surplus in the market goes down, because even if they get some consumer surplus, it's at the expense of my producer surplus essentially. So the total surplus goes down if I were to sell the good to someone who isn't already making a purchase, or if I were to buy the good from someone who isn't already making a sale, I'd lower the total producer or consumer surplus. Okay. But even though markets might be efficient in general, there are a couple scenarios in which they might fail. And I went in depth on these in the last lecture. But markets can fail if groups have market power. So a recent example, there's a chicken manufacturing I forget the name of it, like Privileged Poultry or something like that, something kind of royal sounding. But this chicken manufacturer conspired with Tyson Chicken and Purdue to keep chicken prices above their equilibrium value. So instead of it being a market like this, basically what they did was they artificially decided to keep chicken prices above their equilibrium price, which would be here. Yeah, this kind of looks like the flag of Jamaica or something. By artificially reducing the supply. Okay, that's illegal. But now they're sued, and they owe a lot of money to basically the plaintiffs, who were the Department of Justice, and I think on behalf of people in their supply chain. So they owe a lot of money, but that's an example of market failure. The price was artificially high, so it's not a Pareto efficient allocation, because it's not really, this isn't the real supply curve. This is what the supply curve looks like, because the markets are really high. So essentially you're restricting demand and decreasing total surplus, whereas like consumer surplus should have been consumer surplus should have been this triangle. Instead, it's only this triangle. It's a much lower triangle. Okay. And the consumers of the chicken would have been you guys too, but more likely like a Popeyes or a KFC or a grocery store chain or something like that. I don't know why I'm erasing everything. So that's an example of market failure. What else? If there are externalities, so imagine I had a guitar. I bought a guitar, An externality is when two people buy and sell something, and then a third person is harmed who has nothing to do with the purchase. So if I bought a guitar and I live in a condo building and I play the guitar up until 4 a.m., me and the guitar store are both getting some surplus, but the poor people who live who are trying to sleep in the condo next to me are not necessarily going to be happy about that. So they'll have a negative externality, and the market won't really factor that in. Or if there could be positive externalities. So imagine imagine I teach you and you learn something, and that we transact. I teach you something about economics. You learn something. You get your degree. Presumably that'll have positive externalities because you're going to want to use that degree to to work more efficiently in the future, or to be a better citizen, or whatever the value of your education is to you. If there are positive externalities in a regular market, the third person who otherwise would be benefited isn't necessarily going to be able to help, isn't going to be able to pay for that benefit. So in a regular market system, what the value of the degree is to you matters, and what the value of my opportunity cost of my time matters to me, and that'll determine our supply and demand. But a third party might want there to be more quantity than what's produced in equilibrium because it's better for them. So in a market, there might be underproducing a positive externality or overproducing a negative externality. If you want to restrict or supplement the quantity, depending on if it's underproduced or overproduced. Okay. And lastly, markets can fail or not necessarily the markets fail, but markets can be inefficient, or not inefficient. Inefficiency is the wrong term. Markets can suck. They can operate poorly if you value equity over efficiency. So you can have a market that's in equilibrium for something that's a great good that's very helpful, but it might be radically costly. The price might be insane, and it might be the case that only the rich are able to get that good. And it's not hard to think of examples in the real world, but a market isn't going to care about. It's not going to care about are you starving. Markets don't do that. The ultimate determination of a market is what's your willingness to pay? What's the marginal cost of the producer? What's their cost? Okay. If the price of bread goes up to $1,000 and only the rich are able to afford bread, that's not a great scenario to be in. So you might want to step into the market and maybe produce a price control so that it's not just the rich who are able to afford their necessities. There's always going to be a trade-off, though. So, in doing so, you might make the market more fair, but it's going to be less efficient. It might not be operating in a great way, and it might be the case that it's so inefficient that it's not just that it might be fair, but it's so inefficient that it's not better for even the people that you're trying to improve. So you always have to keep that trade-off in mind, but just know that the trade-off does exist. And if it didn't exist, then there would generally be no issue that we have to talk about. But yeah, so it might be using another real-world example, or I don't know if I used a real-world example yet, but using a real-world example, if you value equity over efficiency, you might want to restrict. Let's say you want to increase taxes on the wealthy. That'll likely make the overall GDP of the country lower, or maybe at least lower in the short term, or whatever. I think the debate's still out there for that. But at least in the short term, that'll probably decrease overall GDP and national income. But it might, or likely will, increase equality, so decrease inequality. So if you value equity well above efficiency, you might want to have a higher tax, or if you value efficiency over equity, you might want to have a lower tax. And there's a lot more nuance to that debate, and what does it mean to be fair? What does it mean to be efficient? Is kind of a very loaded terms. But to different people, that might be one reason why you want to be in a full market system, or even in a market system at all. And if you want to talk more about that and its historical precedents, come to one of my office hours, and I'll be happy to talk at length about market economies, command economies, how they value efficiency, how they value equity, what are the nuances. And not to say that I know everything about that, because nobody knows everything about that. But I try to keep up. So yeah, if you want to go more about that, but that's just a reason. At the end of the day, all I'm giving you is a reason why some people might react negatively to a market economy or a market in general. Okay, so let's move on.